Are we live? Yeah. Okay, we're live. All right. So, welcome to our first college admissions support group. This has been today. I have had the last hour of the day. The whole day was calm until the last hour, and then the camera wasn't working, things weren't loading, whatever. My confetti is gone. But we're talking about college admissions and we're talking about how to kind of survive through college admissions because I feel like there's a lot of focus on the work of college admissions, but there's not enough focus on how do you actually survive this time and how do you get through it in a way that's healthy, but also in a way that makes you happy at the end of the process. I think there's a way to do it. It's just you have to be very conscious of what's going on. And so give me a second, plug it in my phone. All right. So in the panic report today, we talked about the right and wrong way to do a college application. And I think unless people have questions, I'm going to start off with that. And I just realized I need to make sure that I can see the questions in our YouTube. Okay, so the right and wrong way to do a college application is something that kind of came up when I was talking to a student in the streets of Woodbridge. It's not that serious, but it is. But they were like, how do I make sure that I'm doing it the right way? And I think for me, device overheating. Okay. I have no clue what's happening. Anyway, I think the one thing that I tell students all the time is like, that is a false narrative. Like there's a right way to do it, there's a wrong way to do it. And you look at Reddit and you look at other things and you're like, oh, okay, based on what they're saying, this is the right way to do the college application. This is the wrong way. Or you talk to an admissions expert and they're like, this is the right way, this is the wrong way, et cetera, et cetera. I would say as somebody who's been doing this for a while, I decided the other day I need to sit down and actually calculate how many years I've been doing this. There's not really a right or a wrong way, but it does need to be authentic to you. And it does need to be a situation where the application is something that you would stand by if you got rejected. I remind my students all the time, bad applications get accepted all the time. And maybe it's because I am an attorney and that is my background, but I think of an application now. I used to think of it as like a chapter in a book. Okay, we have this entire book that is high school, extracurriculars, whatever. And then we have this first year, second year, third year, fourth year when it comes to applications. And then we go into the application itself, which is, in my mind, used to be a fifth year. That is not what, after speaking with admissions officers, that's not at all true. It's more of a closing argument. Does that make sense? It's connecting the dots that need to be connected just in case the jury doesn't see the dots connecting. And I would say some of my most successful applications have connected the dots between either the student and the application itself, or the student and the college, or the student and why they made the decisions that they were making in terms of college admissions. I think for me, when I look at that, I'm looking for not just a story, but why did you take this science class as opposed to this science class? And why did you do this particular activity over this particular activity? And why is it in alignment with the colleges on your list as opposed to any college in America? Because I think we have this foolish belief that we can just go through and say, okay, everybody in America, this is one application, it works for everybody, it doesn't really matter. But that's not necessarily the case. You have to showcase to them how you're aligned with the institution. And you could have a bad application per se, but still be in alignment. And that alignment overrides everything. You can have a bad presentation as a lawyer of a case and still win the case. You could have a great presentation and still lose the case. So for me, one of the things that I would emphasize is bad applications get accepted all the time. Great applications get rejected all the time. I've said in multiple panic reports, and I will say it again here, hearing it was a great application is usually an indication for me, from an admissions officer, if they're saying this to me before decisions come out, that they're probably not going to be accepting the student, or they're going to be waitlisting the student. Or even after, I would say my applications that got rejected are always classified as a good read. And when I've looked back and said, why didn't this student get accepted? It's because I didn't connect a dot somewhere, or I didn't connect the dot between the student and the institution. And so for me, the work gets done on the school side, and then the application makes the case, if that makes sense. And the case could already be strong before we even get to the application. Or it could be like, you know what, we need a TUA player. So it really doesn't matter what the student is saying, because we need this TUA player, right? Same thing with student athletes, but it might be the same thing with students in their major. We need more people in this major. It doesn't really matter what type of student we have. We need more students in this major, or we need more students in this particular program. So when I'm looking at applications, I'm not necessarily looking for them to be great. And there are times, and I've talked about this a lot, where I know a student's made a mistake, or I don't agree with their approach, but it's authentic to the student, so I'm going to just let it pass, let it ride. Because again, this application could be great and still be rejected. So yeah, if anybody has questions, please let me know. We are kind of just doing our first college admissions support group. We're going to be doing more of these. And in particular, I'm going to do one designated for students and one designated for parents, and then students and parents. But I do know, as somebody who's gone through this process a bunch, it can be really overwhelming. And I am not immune to it being overwhelming, even though I have been in this for a very long time. I think my first college admissions support group, I was nervous, even though I knew in my head they can accept more than one student. I had 5 students applying to UVA. And when the first acceptance came in, I was like, okay. Second one, I was like, okay, great. This is great. I really did think the third, fourth, and fifth one were going to be no, because the first 2 have been yes. There's just something irrational that happens to your brain when you're in this process, that you can reason all you would like, but it's not going to make you feel secure, because working by design, right? So yes, but in terms of the right application, or the right way to do it, I would say the right way to do it is authentically and in a way that makes you feel like, oh, if I get rejected, I can stand by this application. This is the case that I wanted to make, and that's fine. Knowing that even if you get rejected, there's this narrative in admissions that if you get rejected, that's because you did something wrong. And if you get accepted, it's because you did something right. And we talked about this a little bit when we were talking about, like, oh, the essay that got me in. There are times where a student has passed along, and as so they've worked with me, I've gotten negative feedback about that essay, but I haven't conveyed that feedback because the student got into places. So is what it is. However, they're passing along this essay saying this is the essay that got me in, not realizing that, and not realizing they got in despite this essay, not because of this essay. I think one of the things that I saw, I was at a presentation, I think it was it Brown, Harvard, I forgot who else. And there was a book that had been published about, like, these are the essays that got students into one of their institutions. And they're like, 3 of those 6 essays, actually 4 of those 6 essays, not good. But the case had already been made on another aspect of the application. So don't assume, and I think what you're going to see when it comes to early admissions in particular, you're going to see a lot of deferrals. And when a student gets deferred, a lot of times they'll come back to me and say, can we change this? Can we change that? Should we change this? Because they assume if I got deferred, something's not right. Meanwhile, in my head, I'm like, they were going to defer 90% of these students no matter what. The only 10% that they were letting in are athletes, legacies, and special particular programs, or like rural students or something like that. So don't assume that if you get deferred, it's because something's wrong. And if you don't get deferred, it's because it's something right. Or right. Don't assume that the application is bad, because again, good applications get accepted all the time. If anybody has questions, feel free. We're just talking about college admissions, kind of going over some things. For me, for this particular season, I don't think I'm going to do early clients. I just don't have a desire to. But I do think I will do more content this year than I have in the past, and just be a supportive space for people as they go through college admissions, because we can talk about the ways to do an essay, not do an essay, but if we're not creating a supportive space where you feel safe, then none of this is going to matter when the decisions come in. The other thing that I would say has come up a lot is I'm looking at students' list, and the number of times I look at a list and it's dependent on a scholarship, like I'm going to get a scholarship, so I'm going to be good. No. Or I have a whole plan, I'm going to, work full time to get scholarships. Scholarship displacement, essentially when colleges steal scholarships, is real. But also the most amount of money you're going to get is going to come from an institution most of the time. So you have to have a lot of colleges in your bubble or your list that are affordable, not affordable, things like that you would be happy at no matter what happens. That's one of the things that I don't like about the modern admissions practice is it goes from dream school, reach school, target school, safety school. Like that language is only beneficial to the institutions, because if you get into your dream school and you get into your safety school and your safety school is saying you can pay less, your dream school is in a better position to make the argument you should pay more. So finding a characteristic that's indicative of all these schools and finding the same school in different budgets is a better approach, and not relying on scholarships at all and saying these institutions have millions and billions of dollars. There's no reason that somebody who has the GDP of a small country should be expecting me to go out and panhandle for scholarships. Is the most effective way for me when it comes to getting money. But looking at your list and making sure, if I have to go to this particular option, am I going to be happy, satisfied, and content with the opportunities? And if I'm saving money, what am I going to invest that money into is going to be really helpful for you as you move forward. But any questions when it comes to admissions? We talked about the right way and the wrong way. I'm going to look through the comments here. And then I'm going to come back to the TikTok comments. But if you have any comments or any questions when it comes to admissions, please let me know. I think the biggest thing that I would say is it's okay. The fear is baked into the process. So it's not that you are experiencing this fear and it's because you're not good enough. It's because the system is making you feel like you're not good enough so that they can extract as much money as possible out of you. And that is a reality that you have to deal with. Again, I have gotten students into the most competitive schools in this country. So I've gotten students into colleges where there's a 97% rejection rate or a 98%, or it's like between 97 and 98, depending on whether you round up or round down. I have done that in the past, and I still get nervous every college admission season. I still have a lot of doubt, and I recognize that that is a byproduct of a system that makes you feel inherently uncomfortable in this process. Feeling comfortable in this process is not going to necessarily be something that you should anticipate happening. If that makes sense. But you can be successful, and you have to kind of decide in advance what that success is going to look like. And so for me, when we sit down with our students, one of the things that I'm going to ask them is, if all else fails and you go to this particular college, are you going to be happy? Is this just like a backup and you don't really care? Or is this something that you could truly live with and thrive in that location? As somebody who did not, ironically, I placed more students at UVA than I probably placed at any other institution in my career. I'm trying to think if there's another one, like maybe Virginia Tech, but I don't think I have as many students at Virginia Tech as I've had at UVA. I would say I didn't get into UVA. I got waitlisted and then decided to deposit at Virginia Tech and never looked back after my orientation. But honestly, once I got through the process and I got to Virginia Tech, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And as somebody who went to UVA for law school, UVA for undergrad would have been a disaster for me. So when I think about that, you usually end up where you're supposed to be. People will say, well, if I don't get in, I'll transfer. I think one of the mistakes that I'm seeing a lot of students make is going in with the plan to transfer and sticking to that plan no matter what. Then like I'll hear students be like, yeah, I really love the college and I really love this and I really love that. But, you know, ultimately my dream school was da-da-da-da-da. So I decided to transfer after my first year or my second year. And it's just like, enjoy the process. Have you heard of Messina College in Boston College? Is it worth it for a BC bachelor degree in finance? I have heard of it. I have not heard about their finance program. So the way that I would determine if it's worth it, you go to collegescorecard.gov. So it's one word, collegescorecard.gov. And you type in that college and then you go down to finance and they'll tell you exactly how many students are in the particular program. Sometimes it's not big enough, so it can't populate a lot of data. But you go in, you look at that, and then they'll tell you the salary as well. And I find that to be really helpful, especially when we're making decisions about where a student should go or whether they should pay more for a particular college. I would say for undergrad, I'm not really worried where students end up. I think you can become the first successful alumni from any particular college. And I know that there are some colleges where it's really narrow, like, oh, we only recruit at these particular colleges. So if you want to go to like a really exclusive boutique on Wall Street, you have to go to a particular college. I particularly don't have any issue. It's a 2-year program for first generation low income students. Feel like I will have a hard time fitting in with the main campus at students. Okay, I'm gonna look it up actually. Give me 1 second. So I'm gonna first look up, let's see, finance, College Boston. Is it at Boston College or is it in Boston? Oh, okay. I see. Oh, it's at Boston College. Is it? Am I incorrect? Please correct me if I'm wrong. Is it? Oh, first year 2 residential. You study business at Messina. Is it one of those you do your generals at like a community college, you have access to the Boston College situation? Or is it Messina? So, oh, it's a 2-year fully residential associate degree. I would do it. 100% I would do it. 100% I would get an associate degree. And if you meet the 3.4, you have a guaranteed trip. Yes, I would do that. I would say Boston College actually has Anthony Jack there, and Anthony Jack literally wrote the book on first year and like not first year, but what is it called? Why am I blanking on this? Because I use this term all the time. First generation college students. He literally wrote the book on first generation college students. He's over there now running their particular program. He is incredible. Like he is, I would trust anybody under Anthony Jack. So get there, talk to him. Hey, Drew. Oh, hey, Drew. How are you? Are you getting ready for college? But yeah, I would just say for me, Boston College, like their program for first generation and also just students in general trying to acclimate into college, it's unmatched. Thank you so much for your help, Lesson. I'm currently at college. Drew, remind me what college you went to. Because I feel like I remember, but I also don't want to get it wrong. Do you have a couple of recommendations for finance business? Thinking Rhodes, love Rhodes. Swanee, love Swanee. Hampton as in Virginia. Oh, Cal Poly, I love Cal Poly. I knew you were at like a school that I love. But okay, I'm going to start with the Boston College. Yes, I would do that program. 100% wouldn't even hesitate. If I got into that particular program, I would not even hesitate to get an associate's degree, because then even if you decide, you know what, this is not for me, you have an associate's degree after 2 years. But the other thing that I would say is when you're looking at whether a college is worth it, for me, I'm looking at costs most of the time. And it's only $1,000 a year. I don't know if you're a girl or guy or whatever, but I would do it. I would do it. Has no hesitation. Thinking Rhodes, Swanee, or Hampton, or finance or business. Okay. So Swanee is just so peaceful. And I'm going to say this, especially as somebody who's Black and traveling through the South, I had reservations about going to Swanee, especially considering their history. Like if you can look it up to see what their history is. It was probably, it was alarming to me how nice these people were, and genuinely nice. But also I saw a lot of graduate opportunities. And so as somebody who's been in a graduate space, I saw things that undergrads were doing that are graduate levels. Swanee is just, for me, I'm thinking a mellow kid, kind of peaceful for their liberal arts, but they're also really good at finance and things like that, business and things like that. Swanee, you can't go wrong. And it's considered one of the best visually pleasing colleges in the country. Rhodes is really good at giving you a one-on-one mentor. So you kind of want, if you feel like, and Swanee does a great job with this as well, but Rhodes in particular does an amazing job with mentoring students and giving them an advisor whose only job is to advise, not I'm going to be running this business class and teaching graduate students, and I'm going to be also doing advising. So they do a lot of investment in that. I think Rhodes and Swanee are two different kids for me. If I'm looking at the type of kid who goes to Rhodes and the type of kid who goes to Swanee, two very different kids, very different kids. Like if you're super competitive, I would go to Rhodes. If you're, more collaborative, I would go to Swanee. Hampton, the one thing about, and if I'm hoping we're talking about the HBCU, the one thing about HBCUs is they have more pipelines than anybody else. You're probably going to have recruiters on campus almost every single week. Their business program is very strong. But also, one of the things that people don't talk about with HBCUs is I find that my Black students who go to an HBCU versus my Black students that go to a PWI, predominantly white institution, a lot of times when my PWI students are interviewing, they're like, well, we would actually prefer to have an HBCU student here because it's just their narrow thinking of like where they want to invest their time and they want to say, oh, but we still invest in HBCUs and da da da. So there's a lot of designated spots and designated programs for HBCUs that are not the same match by somewhere else. I would say in Virginia in particular, VSU, so Virginia State, and Hampton do a great job. So Hampton though is pricey. You're gonna pay for it. So be prepared to pay for it. But I would say if I had to guess who was gonna get a job, I would say the Rhodes student's gonna get a job. The Hampton student's going to get a job. I would say the Sewanee student's going to get a job, but they're more likely to go into an MBA program. I feel like Sewanee leans academic, but they have great job placements rate. But I would say Hampton's probably the strongest when it comes to, their grads being like, oh, I have an opportunity. Or if you have an issue and you're like, I'm not getting a job, they're more likely to call up their network and somebody help place you. So an alumni is like, well, I can make a job for this student and things like that. So that's what I would say. Okay. Bye, Drew. We'll miss you this year. Enjoy Cal Poly. Okay. What else? What else do we have? Yeah, HBCU. Okay, so yeah, perfect. I would say be prepared to make that investment. I don't think the numbers are always reflected on college scorecard for HBCUs in the way that you have to remember HBCUs are bringing in a large group of people. And so the salary ranges are going to be very different. But I would say Hampton's a very strong program for business. I mean, I think I went there for an athlete and then I went there for a student. And I've never really heard of a Hampton student having an issue with the business program. I'm thinking about, I think VSU also has a strong one. VSU has a very strong one. And I think there's a lot of magic at VSU that people don't discuss. So I know they've been making a lot of investments. They've also gotten a lot of grants. And I think Hampton, but also Virginia State has a great, like, one of the things I like about them, and like this is no shade to the other HBCUs, is when they get money, they invest it into their students. Like I can see how the campus has changed for the better for student experiences when I go back to Hampton and VSU. The views though at Hampton are amazing. So, but those are also two very different students. Like that's one thing I would say. Like a VSU student and a Hampton student are very different students. So it's really going to depend on the type of student, the type of profile, and what they're bringing to the table. But I think they both have really good connections. Norfolk State is also a great option. Our Commonwealth Secretary is from Norfolk State. So yeah. Okay. Anything else? We talked about, for those of you who came in late, we talked about right and wrong applications, like the right way and the wrong way. There's no right way to do it and there's no wrong way to do it. And I'm not just saying that, I'm saying bad applications get accepted all the time. Good applications get rejected all the time. So I would say just make sure, the one thing I will say is make sure you're actually answering the question that you were asked. So one of the things that I do with my students is I'll highlight where they answered the question, or I'll let them know like, hey, I wasn't able to highlight because I don't know where the question was answered here. And do it in the first couple of minutes. I find that or the first couple of sentences, I find a lot of people like try to build up to it. And it's just like, remember that this is probably a millennial that came in late, took your job. Like, I'm just thinking about me. I wouldn't be too late, but I might be late and may have forgotten that it's committee day. And their job is not to say, oh, I need to reject this student, accept this student. Their job is actually to present the case to the committee and say, okay, this is the case that we have for this particular student. They want students in their particular region to get accepted because that makes them look good. So put the information that's important up front. The example that I always kind of fall back to is if somebody says in an essay, you know, my grandmother made the best baked whatever, da 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 da. She folded in the flour. She, you know, made sure the butter was out of the refrigerator so it was a little bit softer, da 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 da. Then, and that taught me patience, but also to think ahead. I would start the entire essay by flipping it and just saying, my grandmother told me to think ahead, but you also have to think, what job is this essay doing? So my grandma taught me to think ahead, and that is something that allowed me to plan, you know, my extracurriculars, blah, 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 as I got ready for this college admissions journey, whatever. You have to explain to them why they should care to read this essay, because if there's not really a purpose, if there's not a job, they can just present based on your transcript, your school profile, your recommendation. Don't assume that you are not going to be in a position. Don't assume that they're going to have time to read everything, because the reading time I've heard from some admissions officers that they're taking a minute or less. I've heard from others, like I have 20 minutes. But if it's not helpful, they're not going to read it. If it's not going to add to the case, they're not going to read it. So get to the point as soon as possible and then go back through. I usually do, this is the thesis, then I do the intro, I restate the thesis, and then I close out with the thesis. I make sure that the top and the bottom of any essay has the most relevant information, just in case somebody's scanning. And I might do a lot of paragraph breaks too, so I can have the emphasis, realizing that they're not going to be always they're not going to always show up when the application is downloaded into whatever system the college is using. So that's that. But just make sure everything has a job and that you have done what you need to do in terms of the essay. The essay could suck. It doesn't have to be the greatest essay in the world. I've had great essays. I've also had really bad essays. And I knew that the case was made somewhere else. So let's keep it moving. But I've had really great essays. I had one student where I was listening to another consultant, completely bad advice. That student got into probably more colleges than a lot of students, other students who did great essays got into. So, and got into one of the most competitive colleges, despite doing a lot of things wrong. So just know that you have to stand by your application. You're not making the case because the case is over 4 years. You're more presenting the conclusion, connecting the dots. And don't forget to connect some dots. Because I would say every rejection, I can point to a lack of context. So why didn't the student do robotics? Because they didn't do robotics because they crossed town to do, you know, this particular program, and they can't stay after school to do robotics, but they do help with this, and this. And like they use their elective time to build their skills in this particular science. Thoughts on Spellman, Smith, Sarah Lawrence, and then English, writing, film, open curriculum types. I love all three programs. Women's colleges in particular, I feel like are really strong. Spelman has a very strong network. I would say make sure you have Spelman money, make sure you have Smith money, and make sure you have Sarah Lawrence money. I would say Sarah Lawrence does a really good job packaging financial aid. But I think women's colleges are very similar to HBCUs in that their alumni are more engaged, and therefore it's easier for them to help students get jobs, get opportunities. I think any one of those are pretty good. For writing and creative writing, I would think, or film, I would assume that you're probably going to need a master's. So whatever allows me to get my undergraduate degree in the most affordable way is the direction I would be headed. I might pay, like if there was a 2 to 3, maybe 5,000 differential between Spelman and let's say Smith, would I pay more for Spelman? Maybe. Maybe. I might, because they have the HBCU and they have the Spelman network. So they have a women's network, and then they also have the HBCU network, and then they're also Spelman. So I think they're a really strong program, but I do feel like, and this is just because of structural issues that we see in society, Sarah Lawrence is more competitive when it comes to financial aid packages than Spelman, because Spelman just doesn't have the same level of resources. Smith's a great program as well. I don't think you can go wrong. For me, that one would probably come down to price. And in advance, what I tend to do with a lot of my students is I sit them down and say, what are we going to pay more for, right? Like if we're going to pay more, what are we paying for? I would say I would pay $5,000 for access to the Spelman network. I would, and just based on what I see. But does that make sense for you? It really depends. I think when you're in that all three or when you're in that women's network, you already have that built in. So would I pay more to go to Spelman over Sarah Lawrence? Depends on the student. Also, I feel like Spelman, Smith, Sarah Lawrence, when you look at those three programs, again, very different students. Like the students that a Spelman student could go to Hampton, a Sarah Lawrence student could go to Sewanee, a Smith student could go to Sewanee Rhodes or Hampton. Like it really depends on the personality of the student at that point and where they're going to thrive. But I would assume masters. So when I sit down with my students, I have them plan out the next 10 years. And then also, like if something goes wrong, what are we going to do? The other thing that I like to tell students in particular is like, if you save money on one particular part, like let's say I save money by going to Sarah Lawrence over Spelman. You could also do a summer program at Spelman. You could do a master's at Spelman. So the money that you save can go into building that connection with Spelman. But a Spelman girl's a Spelman girl. You can't really replace that in the same way you can with like if you go to Boston College or you go to Clemson. Like, okay, let's go to Clemson for cheaper, and then let's go to Boston College for a summer program or something like that, a master's. So I always say if you're really stuck on it, just do a master's over there, do a 1-year program, a writing intensive workshop over there, do something else and save the money. Open curriculums I feel like open curriculums are fraud. They're not as open. I feel like they're locking down open curriculums during this economy. But that's just a personal opinion. That's not rooted in something. I also feel like open curriculums do have the danger of putting students, you have to have a very motivated student who knows what they're doing. Because if you go into an open curriculum with a student that doesn't know what they're doing, it could end up in a 5th, 6th and possibly 7th year. So if your student loses things, would I put them in an open curriculum program? Probably not. I'm not somebody who should have a lot of choices. I'm somebody who does well with a set defined path. And at Virginia Tech, I have that. So, but I do find that a lot of there's more restrictions on open curriculum in this economy than there has been in the past. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else when we're talking about college admissions? Anything else that I need to cover? Let's see. Just to remind everybody, we've already covered, you're welcome. We've already covered, there's no right way to do an application. You should be nervous because the system is banking on you being nervous. You've been conditioned over time to be nervous. Write from your gut and make sure you answer the question and your essay has a job. And then what else have we covered? Different particular colleges. Don't spend too much for undergrad. The one thing I tell people is talk to a bunch of adults and say, what was your major in college? Now what's your job? And you'll see how much undergraduate education just lays a foundation. I studied pre-law, history, sociology, a little bit of math, and I went to law school, and now I'm an admissions consultant. The life has a way of directing you to the career that you're going to be in. And a lot of times I'll find like an architecture student who's working in a finance role or something like that. So the one thing I would say is I don't necessarily love majors. I don't necessarily, if your student is indecisive, or if you're like, this is a lot of money, but the only reason we're paying this is because they're going to get this great engineering degree because the school is known for engineering. You have to say to yourself, if my student drops out of engineering and they end up in another major, will I still be comfortable paying this price? Because I think there does need to be a lot of flexibility when it comes to undergrad. You do need to be tactile and agile when it comes to undergrad. And you have to realize that you're not going to necessarily work in your particular major. So you're just getting the foundations. You're either going to need career development money or you're going to need, graduate degree money. And as somebody who went to law school, I will say spending less money on undergrad was the best decision I could have made. Best decision I could have made is to spend less on undergrad. I didn't do it deliberately, but it did allow me, when other people were looking at law schools, they were like, well, I've already paid, 60, 70, and this is, in my time, that was expensive. 60, 70, 80 for undergrad. I cannot afford to go to a more expensive law school. I knew that all of my money was going to be going to law school. So I luckily got a scholarship for law school and got I think more than half off of my law school, but I didn't have the limitations of I can't apply here. I'm not going to be able to afford that. I'm not gonna. And also I was aware, which a lot of students aren't, that I was going to have to reduce my working hours and that I was going to have to take a year off to study for the bar or 6 months off to study for the bar. So when you think about those type of things, I think about the 10 years leading up to that, because I spent so little money on undergrad. I was able to, one, get a car, and then two, use my job and some of the money my parents had saved for college on a condo, which we then flipped when I went to undergrad and from undergrad to law school. And I was able to use that money to help me as I cut back my hours for law school. Be aware that undergrad is only the first step. It should not be the most important investment unless there's the prime example I like to use is Georgia Tech, where it's if you go to Georgia Tech for 1 year, the second year you can do their externship program, and you can make $10,000 to $15,000 in their externship. I might be willing to pay more just so that I have a student that has an externship or an internship and they have a reliable job or things like that. So be aware of that. I will be back. I don't know if it's going to be the same time every single week. Sorry about that. But I guess hit the alerts or something. I don't really know how this works. Please know that I hit some filter. This is not what my face looks like. But yeah, I will be back. And if there's any questions, you can always put them in my comments. I do not see my messages. Thank you. I don't see my messages. I'm not looking at the messages. So if you have a question, put it in there. I can either address it in the panic report daily, or I can address it here, or I could do both. But yeah, just don't spend too much money on undergrad is what I would say. Know going into this season, I'm willing to spend this amount for this particular college because this particular college has this externship for Rhodes in particular. I know we talked about this amount for Rhodes because Rhodes has a one-on-one advisor. This amount for Sewanee because they have a lot of these graduate programs. Know what you're paying for. Listen, colleges love to sell vibes. They love to sell vibes. The most expensive colleges are going to have the best vibes. It's like, oh, it feels like home here and it's so amazing. And they have this incredible networking program, but I'm also buying this like really great. Go visit for the summer. Don't spend all of your money on that when you're going to need money for the next 10 years. Knowing this particular economy and my students who graduated in this economy, I would say having more money on hand in case your student needs help with like an apartment or a job or relocating for a job, and this is so big, making sure a student has money when they're doing an unpaid internship that's going to land them a job. That's more important than, oh, they have to go to the best college. Okay. Your content has been so helpful. Thank you. I hope it has been helpful. And again, put questions in the comments. Do not email me. Oh, don't message me. Okay. But I will be back. All right. Bye, everyone. Bye, everyone on here. Goodbye.